So recording is started. So, John, since you're our sole attendee right now, um, this is meant to be relatively informal. So IvyCat Office Hours, you already know the idea behind it, but once a month we're gonna just do a little open webinar. And this one we're doing with GoToMeeting. It may be in the future that we do these through Google Hangouts or GoToWebinar or something like that if they get more popular. But we thought at least in the beginning we wouldn't have a ton of attendees, so we'd be able to fit them in on our GoToMeeting um, subscription, which gives us up to like 26 people or something like that. So that's the idea of it. And let's see if I can forward my little presentation here. So I was going to just pimp connecting with IvyCat. If you're not already, you can subscribe to our blog. You can go to ivycat.com/blog, and in the sidebar there's a little connect block. And in that block you can sign up for updates to our blog. When we update our own plugins, there's news. There's a few different categories you can sign up for, but that's a great way to keep in touch. And there's our Twitter link, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google+, and I think we're networked on some of those things already. But I encourage you to check them out. And Jenny is in charge of our social stuff, so she's the lady in charge of updating these things. So that's how to connect with us. And then today what I was going to cover is CloudFlare. Talk a little bit about CloudFlare. I don't know, John, have you heard of CloudFlare? You can just chat to us. Yep. All right, great. So we're going to talk a little bit about CloudFlare, what it is, how it can help out websites, and then talk about some general WordPress security stuff, including some plugins that you can use for security. I was going to harp on people for using good passwords, on how to use good passwords, and how to secure some stuff about securing files and folders, which is largely driven by plugin stuff, but there's some other techniques that we can use too. And then Q&A. And anything goes with Q&A. It doesn't have to be about Cloudflare or WordPress security. If you just have questions about themes or plugins or something like that, we'll just do our best to answer anything. So that's that. So Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a neat web service. If you've heard of it, then you probably know it kind of has two main functions. One is speed and one is security. So speed is that Cloudflare is a CDN, which stands for Content Delivery Network. And I suppose I can shut off my webcam here. So what that means is that the Content Delivery Network mirrors your content across the network, so that when people are visiting, and this little image here shows the 28 different locations that Cloudflare currently has data centers. And so this is all part of their network. So what's cool about this is if you're using Cloudflare on your website and someone visits your website from Seattle, they've got a data center in Seattle. So assets that are being served up to your site visitor, if they're visiting from the Seattle area, are most likely going to be served up from the Cloudflare's network at a location that's proximally or geographically closer to the visitor. So if they're visiting in Seattle, there's probably going to be stuff served up from Seattle. If they were in Brazil, they're going to be served up content from Sao Paulo. And the reason that that's important is that there's latency on the web. If your servers, like in our case, IvyCat's data center is in Los Angeles. And so if someone's visiting from Milan, it's actually geographically, further away from Los Angeles. And even though we're talking about milliseconds to load a web page, usually milliseconds, it's going to load faster if you are geographically closer to the place that is sending you your content. So Cloudflare is a huge CDN and a content delivery network, and they are a modern CDN, meaning they don't really rely on a lot of old technology to run their servers and run the network. They've really invested a lot in a great infrastructure that is fast. So that's great. And then the other big function that Cloudflare offers is sort of a web application firewall. That's how I think of it. You see the term WAF used, web application firewall. And so this is a little image that I just stole from Cloudflare's site. And what it shows is when you're not using Cloudflare, you get good visitors that visit your website, and they come right to your website. You get crawlers and bots like Google or Bing or other crawlers that maybe aren't so legit. And when they come to visit your website, they go right to your website. And when attackers want to attack your website, they come right to your website. And they show this little slow pipes here. I don't know if you can make it out, but basically what they're saying is they're coming over the same pipes to get to your website. So how Cloudflare is different is that it stands in the middle of all of your web traffic. So good visitors, crawlers, bots, attackers, whenever they go to your website, they're passing through Cloudflare's network first. And that does two things. One is because they're a content delivery network, all of the images, JavaScript, CSS, any static files that your website needs are actually being pulled from Cloudflare's CDN rather than your server, which saves you bandwidth, and it actually speeds up the site so that you get a better user experience for your users. And then the other thing it does is that it sort of vets the kind of traffic that you're getting. So in the case of an attacker, especially if they're going after WordPress, they may have very specific things that they're trying to do. Like, I want to put in baloney comments on a website. That's an attack of sorts. It's not as malicious as it could be, but if they're trying to spam you, when they post a comment, it goes through Cloudflare's network. And if you're using Cloudflare, they can screen some of that stuff. And if it's baloney, they can stop it before it hits your website. Also, other common attacks are things like DDoS attacks, which is a distributed denial of service attack. And that's where an attacker usually will have something like a botnet, like they put out a virus or something like that, and they compromise a whole bunch of people's computers or their Android phones or whatever. And then once they've compromised them, they use those computers and Android phones to try to deny service to people by taking a website down. So, like, for example, if an attacker were trying to take down IvyCat, they use all these different devices and computers that are compromised to just hammer on ivycat.com and overwhelm it with traffic, and it sort of crumbles. So the nice thing about using Cloudflare is that you've got that in the middle. So when the attacker tries to do a DDoS attack and Cloudflare starts to notice an insanely high number of hits to your website that are not legit, or maybe they're trying to access files that they shouldn't access directly, like the WP Commons file or something like that, Cloudflare learns this and they stop it in the cloud before it gets to your website, which helps because your server doesn't go down. Like a good denial of service attack can take a server down like that, because you just flood it with traffic and the server spends so much time trying to answer all these queries that it trips up and then just becomes super slow and then eventually goes offline. So by having Cloudflare in the middle, it can really sort of save that. So this is the point in my little slide presentation where I'm going to skip out of the slide presentation and just kind of show a little setup of Cloudflare. So I'm going to exit this for the moment. And my demo site for this afternoon is my wife's site. She's a writer, and it's a really small site. There's only like 3 pages on it at the moment, but I did hook it up to Cloudflare. And it's just sarahamundson.com if you don't see that. And it's quite quick. When you switch pages and stuff, it is pretty snappy. And I've got Cloudflare open as well. So in order to use Cloudflare, we've got kind of 2 different ways to sign up. The traditional way is to just go over to Cloudflare and sign up through Cloudflare. But also at IvyCat, we've done something where we've added Cloudflare to all of our servers. And that helps in a very specific instance. And actually, I'm going to pause for a second and pull up cPanel here on a site so that I can show you exactly what that looks like. So give me just one moment. do something slightly different here. So IvyCat is now a partner of CloudFlare, and the way we got that status is that we have installed CloudFlare on all of our servers. There's actually a module that we install for Apache that allows us to easily enable CloudFlare for any account on our server or on our servers. And there's sort of a catch to that, and I want to talk about that. So sorry, one sec here. Oh, I'm trying to pull up Sarah's account so that I can show it to you, but I made a mistake here, so I'll pull up a different site. In fact, I'm going to use Miss Jenny as an example here. So this is cPanel, and Jenny has her site Up Your Impact Factor on our Panther server. And what you'll see now in any of our servers is this Cloudflare icon. And what this does is if you click on it, it allows you to activate Cloudflare. I see your question there, John, and I will comment on that in just a moment. So within cPanel, you can sign up for Cloudflare. The catch is this, that if you sign up for Cloudflare through cPanel, it'll only work if you use a subdomain with your domain name. So that is to say, if your site is sarahamenson.com and you don't use the www in front of sarahamenson.com, which she doesn't, then you can't actually use the cPanel plugin, because the way the cPanel plugin works is different than the way signing up for Cloudflare directly works. What it does is it only works for subdomains, and www.sarahamenson.com would be considered, the www is considered the subdomain. So if a user signs up for Cloudflare through cPanel, they have to make sure that their site is using the www. And once they've done that, then and they sign up here, Cloudflare will create an account for them and send them an email saying, hey, go here to reset your password and you can log into your account. And then further, what it'll do is that cPanels will create some changes in their DNS record to map all traffic that's destined for www.sarahamenson.com through the Cloudflare network. It doesn't require changing your domain name to point your domain name over to Cloudflare. You just keep your domain pointed at the cPanel server, and then once you enable Cloudflare, it just rewrites the URLs for www to go through Cloudflare's network, and it creates another entry to come back from that. So the net effect is that when you're browsing the website and you look at like URLs or you're looking at the source code, you'll never see Cloudflare mentioned within the source code because it's just referencing www, and that automatically goes through Cloudflare. So John, your question is, can you comment on the time for Cloudflare Network to pick up site changes hosted by IvyCat, or is the site changes made on the CDN directly? So yes, I can comment on that. So I think what you're talking about is like once you've got Cloudflare implemented and you make changes on the website, how quickly do they show on the CDN? All right. So yes, John says. So that's a great question. And actually what I want to do is I'll show you Sarah's Cloudflare setup. Really, the answer to your question is it should be pretty quick. However, because Cloudflare is a CDN and they offer caching, you have some control over this within the settings of Cloudflare. So you can tell Cloudflare how long that they can cache individual items. And there's also a way that you can purge the cache purposely.
Eric,
yes.
Okay, we lost
you. You got me? All right. So
your audio's going.
Is my audio fading in and out?
Just barely.
Okay. I'll try and sit still here. Can you hear me just fine now?
Yeah, it's going in and out.
All right.
Real choppy. Okay.
Give me one sec here. Let me see if I've
It's
got
pretty
another.
choppy.
Let me see if I've got another headset I can put in. One sec.
Okay. Okay. Should I sing like the elevator music while we wait for him to come back?
Just switched out my headset. Let's see if that's any better.
That's much better.
Much better? Okay, good. I have to mark this other headset because I've had that happen before, and I think I probably got a little short. All right. Losing your audio, bad. DDoS. All right. So you guys can still see the screen with Sarah's site over here. I'm going to switch over to the back end of the site and show you real quick. There's really only one thing that I have done different within this site for CloudFlare, and that is add this CloudFlare plugin. And once you add it and you activate it, you see it show under plugins here. And it's really only got one or two main jobs. You'll notice that we've got the domain name in there, the Cloudflare API key, and then the email address that's associated with the Cloudflare account. One answer to your question, John, is that once you've got Cloudflare enabled on the website and you've got this plugin enabled on the website, you see there's this development mode. So what this is when you're actively making changes to the website and you don't want Cloudflare to be caching stuff because you want to be able to see the changes made in real time, you can switch development mode on and update, and then that'll tell it not to cache, basically. So it puts it in a temporary, it sort of temporarily shuts off Cloudflare's caching. So let's take a look at Sarah's Cloudflare here. So I've logged into Cloudflare, or I did. Let me do this again. So she's all set up. And because Sarah doesn't use the www in front of her domain, we actually signed up directly through the website and through the Cloudflare website. So that's what I would recommend. If you're not using the www, I'd recommend it that way. The fundamental difference between signing up directly at Cloudflare and signing up through cPanel is that when you sign up through cPanel, you do not need to make any DNS changes to your domain name. You don't need to repoint your domain name. When you sign up for Cloudflare directly, the idea is that you redirect all website traffic to Cloudflare. They become your name server. So you point your domain name over to Cloudflare and they manage all the traffic. So as part of the sign up, they actually read your DNS record and pull in all the DNS entries and allow you to add or edit them. And then once you save it, then they show you what is going through the Cloudflare network. So I'll give you a really quick tour here. This is her website control panel. She could add more websites if she wants. And she's on their free plan, which is great. And the free plan works really well for most people. You need a paid plan right now if you want more control. They've got some, upsell stuff, like you can do more aggressive caching. If you use SSL on the website for like e-commerce or securing things, then they also require right now the pro account. That will change later on this year, though. They're actually rolling out a way that you can have SSL on any website and not pay for it. There's sort of 3 or 4 different implementations of that. And I think, at $20 a month for their pro account, it's darn worth it. For the CDN and the extra security that they offer. So anyway, I clicked through to apps, and so Cloudflare offers a bunch of apps that are sort of third-party sites or services or things like that that you can easily plug into your site. I use CodeGuard on some of our sites, which is an external monitoring service, and you can turn that on through here and connect it. They've got Google Analytics. You can actually make it so that Cloudflare puts your Google Analytics code in, and they'll make sure that that's in on all the pages that are served up, even if they're served up from their network. So there's a bunch of different things that you can plug in. That's the apps portion of it. And then we'll go back and take a look at analytics. So once you're hooked up, what's great is since all of your traffic goes through Cloudflare, they record really accurate analytics. Not only can you tie in Google Analytics, but they're measuring traffic in real time. So what you can see here is that in the last 7 days, she had 977 page views. Of that, 946 of it was regular traffic, 31 of it was crawlers and bots. How many unique visitors? You can see what sort of traffic is coming from the search engines, like Google crawled 28 pages over that 7 days, and then it shows how many requests were saved by Cloudflare. In her case, there's a technical reason why there's not more requests saved by Cloudflare, but the idea is that requests being things like cascading style sheets or JavaScript or things like that, things that Cloudflare can cache and serve up directly from their network rather than having to request from the site. And then the bandwidth that they save you. They say, on an average setup, they can save 50 to 60% of your bandwidth. And I think if I move this out to like 30 days, we'll see, we're doing pretty good here. If there are threats, like if there are DDoS attacks, or if they're trying to compromise WordPress in some way that's known, you'll see the threats listed there as well, and they'll show you, like what country they came from and how they were stopped. So that's sort of the dashboard for analytics, which is kind of neat. And then threat control. This isn't going to show much because she hasn't had any threats, but when there are threats on the site, like malware, or they'll even do spam, like this plugin here. Once you've enabled it, it says it up here, but it will, when you mark a comment as spam, it gets sent to the Cloudflare network as well. And so they help sort of block spam. So it's a way to get less spam on your site. So threat control doesn't show much in this case. Let's go back and kind of look at the actual settings that we see for Cloudflare. So one is DNS settings. And this, since we signed up locally, this just shows Sarah's DNS record. So her main site points to this IP address. And then there's several other things going on here in her DNS. It shows where mail is handled. What you see here, or the important things to notice here, are these clouds over on the right-hand side. So when you see the orange cloud, it means the traffic for this domain is going through Cloudflare. When you see something like this, where it's gray and the little arrows going around it, it's not going through Cloudflare. So in general, the only things you want to go through Cloudflare are web traffic. So we're taking the web traffic for her main domain and then the www version of her domain through Cloudflare. So all requests get screened. So those are the DNS settings. And then you notice once I set her up, it gave me name servers to point her domain to. So if we were to do a lookup on her domain, you'd see that they point to ivan.nscloudflare.com and kara.nscloudflare.com. And then let's look at the Cloudflare settings, because this is really where it gets interesting. So there are 3 tabs here: the overview, security, and performance. And so on the overview, you get to choose an overall security profile. And by default, it's set to medium. And we'll see what these mean on another tab here. But what this does is control how strict Cloudflare is on security. And then performance, this gives you CDN only, CDN plus basic, or CDN plus full optimizations. And the difference here is CDN only means it's only really going to serve up your static files like CSS, JavaScript, that kind of stuff, images. Basic optimizations does some additional optimization stuff to try and speed things up, and then full optimizations is much more rigorous. To kind of go back to your question initially, John, if you're not in development mode, you can always come in and purge your cache in Cloudflare directly here. So if I purge cache, it's going to wipe out everything on the CDN for Sarah's site. So the next time someone goes to sarahamenson.com, all the images and things like that are going to need to be re-pulled into Cloudflare from the website so Cloudflare can serve them up. And that's really kind of how this works, is as you add new content to the site, you're doing it directly within WordPress, and then say you add an image to the site, and you add an image to a new blog post, and you publish that blog post. The word goes out, and someone comes and visits that blog post. What'll happen is when they request that blog post, that request goes through Cloudflare. Cloudflare sees, okay, in order to serve up this blog post, I need to download this HTML, this JavaScript, these images, and it does that and pulls them up to the Cloudflare's network and then serves up the page from Cloudflare's network. So the next person who comes along, they get something that's pre-cached, and it's really fast. Here's where you can just switch development mode on and off right through Cloudflare. Again, you can do that through the WordPress plugin. IPv6 is, I would just leave it on full for right now. It's not super widely used, but these are just sort of default settings that I think are just fine. The SPDY, this is something that comes with pro accounts, but it's something that's driven really by Google, a way to make web pages load faster. So if you're on a pro account, you can turn that on if you want. Always online is really helpful. And this is something that I think could help a lot of our customers. Like, the idea being, if your server goes down or if your website gets borked for some reason and it's just not available, when someone goes and visits the website, if you've got always online turned on, it will serve up a cached version of the page with a header up at the top that says, hey, the server appears to be down right now. Here is the page you requested in the meantime. So it actually gives people what they're looking for, even if your server is not available. And then there's some IP geolocation, Google Analytics, you can plug that in. SSL, this again is for pro, business, or enterprise customers. This is a really neat thing. I think IvyCat is going to end up doing this within the next few months, sort of moving our stuff to Cloudflare. We use a different CDN at the moment, but we'll move up to Cloudflare and then actually copy our SSL certificate into their network too. So everything is fully secured. And then there's a way to do mobile redirects and set like maximum upload size or things like that. We can really drill down into these settings if we go to the next tabs. So security here, security profile, like we saw in the overview, was medium. And so here's where we dig into what these things are. So advanced DDoS protection is something that comes with the business accounts, and it's automatically enabled. I think you can't really enable it here. It'll tell you have to upgrade, but they do provide DDoS protection just by default on the free accounts. The advanced DDoS protection gives you some more controls over it, and I think makes it a little more strict on their end. Here's where you can switch your basic protection level. If you are under attack, like if you know you have a DDoS thing going on, you can log into Cloudflare and say, I'm under attack, and it will, in fact, we can click learn more here and see, let's see. So a high security setting challenges all visitors that have exhibited threatening behavior within the last 14 days. So, and they can even do things like automatically insert captchas within forms. So if people are behaving weirdly on the website and they think it's non-standard behavior, that they can make them fill out a captcha or something like that. So challenge passage TTL, if they are suspicious, you can tell them how long they're considered suspicious for. Email address obfuscation, this is great when you turn it on. If someone's got an email address just showing on the website, like info@ivycat.com, it actually will scramble that email address so that when spammers have bots that come along and try and harvest email, they don't get it. So several other things here. Hot link protection. This is something you can turn on to prohibit people from using your images on other sites. And then the advanced web application firewall is, again, something that comes with a pro account. What's cool about this, and I'll tell you, I've used this on at least one site so far, is that the advanced web application firewall, Cloudflare has rule sets for many common web platforms, including WordPress. And so you can say, hey, this is a WordPress site, and I want to use the WordPress rule set. And so they will know that yours is a WordPress site and know that there are any common exploits that are announced for WordPress, they patch and they will shut down in the cloud. So like, for example, a few months ago, there was an exploit with XML RPC where someone could uh, send a URL to the XML RPC file within WordPress and append a string to it to try and do other stuff. Like, in fact, I just saw the day before yesterday that there was a plugin called Slider or Revolution Slider or Slider Revolution that it has a bad security vulnerability where if you send a certain URL to them, you can actually pull up like the WP config file in WordPress, which is the file that contains all of the credentials for your database and that sort of stuff. And once they get the access to your database, all bets are off. They can just compromise your entire site. So by enabling the web application firewall rules, that can help shut that stuff down in the cloud. So you see we're about at the halfway point, and I'm kind of long-winded here. So I'm going to just jet through this last one real quick. So performance on Sarah's site, I have CDN plus basic optimizations. Interestingly, I'm using another CDN on our site that I will probably take out because it's sort of, I think that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing CloudFlare save so much bandwidth on her site, because we're kind of using two different content delivery networks. Performance. So caching level, you can tell CloudFlare how aggressive it should be with caching. And right now I've got hers set to aggressive, but you see some examples here, like it'll cache just a basic, if it's set to basic, it'll cache a static image. If it's simplified, it'll cache the image without a query string. And if it's aggressive, it'll cache the whole thing. And if you don't know, this is probably not worth explaining too much more about, but it basically has to do with how aggressively Cloudflare will cache stuff. And then the minimum expire TTL. So specify how long Cloudflare cache resources will remain on your visitors' computers. So by default, it's 1 day for this aggressive caching, but you could, if you have a busy site, you may want it to be, a couple hours or an hour or something like that. And that's just fine. And then auto minify web optimization. This is a way that Cloudflare can automatically minify JavaScript and CSS and HTML files before sending them to the user. So even if on your website you have say you've got a CSS file that's 100 kilobytes and it's got a lot of empty space in it and stuff like that, if that CSS file is minified through Cloudflare, it's going to take out all the empty space and just kind of zip it up as small as it can to make it as efficient as possible and serve it up that way. And then Rocket Loader is another way of asynchronously loading JavaScript resources, which can speed up a site. My experience is that it's good to play with these settings and actually test the website that you're working on using a tool like pingdom.com or webpagetest.org to kind of see how things are loading. And sometimes you think like, oh, geez, if I turn this, if I just make it more aggressive, or if I do full optimizations or whatever, it should be faster. But sometimes it depends on what else you've got going on the site. So it's good to, I think, use pingdom.com. In fact, if you haven't used it already, I'll show you. If you go to Pingdom, and then it's actually there, Pingdom Tools. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom and Pingdom Tools. I should just bookmark this little thing. So it's Pingdom's website speed test. And if you put in a URL here, it'll just run a test up against the website and show you how quickly things load and total size. So in Sarah's case, her homepage here is 405 kilobytes. It loaded in just under 700 milliseconds, which is 7/10 of a second. There were 29 requests. So those 29 requests are all of these files. There's a JavaScript file, there's forms, CSS files, and stuff like that. So a total of 29 files were requested, and it gets a performance grade of 86 out of 100. It says it's faster than 94% of all tested websites. So that's pretty good. So when you're making changes in Cloudflare, it's good to kind of keep this open in a tab and retest things and make sure that you're going in the right direction. So I think I'm going to quit it with Cloudflare at the moment and see if you've got any questions about Cloudflare, anything I didn't answer. Jenny, John, anybody? Looks good. All right. So what I really like about this, I mean, from a hosting perspective, what this really does for IvyCat is several things. One is when more people on our servers use Cloudflare, it takes some load off of our servers and it keeps them more secure because they're less susceptible to attack from ne'er-do-wells, from hackers, crackers, whatever. It also makes a faster user experience for the end user, which I think is the most important thing. A faster website is more fun to use, and you get your information more quickly. John's question is, what about going back to non-Cloudflare if it's not working out? Great question. So basically, it depends a little bit on how you implement it, John. If you implemented it through cPanel, which most likely you wouldn't do in your case, but if it was implemented through cPanel, then it's just a matter of turning it off in cPanel. I think you can do that, and then when you turn it off in cPanel, then the www subdomain will no longer be mapped through Cloudflare, and it'll just be coming directly to the website. If you're going through, if you've signed up for Cloudflare directly, like Sarah has here, the change would be actually pointing your web traffic back to the server or to some other DNS provider. You could feasibly go into Cloudflare and just turn off the optimizations, keep your DNS pointed there, but not use a lot of their services. But if you would tried Cloudflare and you sort of had it and it's not working for you, then and you wanted to just get rid of it, then eventually what you would do is just repoint the name servers for your domain name to whatever server that you're hosting on or to an external DNS provider. I hope that answered your question. I think right now, Cloudflare powers over 1 million sites. I mean, they've got a huge network, and I've met these guys. They're really smart folks, and they're doing some really neat things with technology to look at web pages. Even so many websites are driven by content management systems now, like WordPress. And with content management systems, we tend to, as web designers, think, oh, well, these things change all the time, and that's one of the great things about a content management system is, you can go in and change content on a whim. You can change your theme. You can do all this stuff and affect how the website looks. But what we really see over time is that websites really don't change that much. Not like every second or every minute or something like that. Usually there's new content added, but pages are while they're not completely static, there's a lot of stuff that remains the same. And so Cloudflare's got this really intelligent analysis where they look at websites over time and figure out what changes and are able to cache things intelligently to keep websites zippy on the user's end, but protected and also working well. So I'm really happy with the Cloudflare service. We have a bunch of customers who have been hammered by malware, and we have our WordPress support and maintenance packages where we can install Sucuri and we can sort of lock down things on their site. But this provides just that added level of protection in the cloud and also speeds up the site, which is great. And then, one other thing, which I don't know if you guys heard, but Google made an announcement last week saying, hey, we're starting to use HTTPS as a ranking indicator, meaning when you have a site that runs on HTTPS all the time, it's always secured, that they can give some preferential search positioning to it. They said right now it affects sites in less than 1% of the sites on the internet. But I think what you'll see with IvyCat over the next few months is that we're going to move the entire website to be HTTPS, so every page you visit is secured. Google has done the same in their own stuff, in their own apps. They're securing everything. There's this movement to secure the whole web, and that's what that's about. So, any other questions on Cloudflare? Or I can go on and talk about a few things, or if you got, all right. Well, then I'll prattle on a little bit more about WordPress security. But if you guys have questions, holler. I mean, we've got a very small attendee list of attendees at the moment, so we can take this any direction we need to. Or if you're done, if you got what you needed, then that's fine too. So, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about WordPress security. And John, I believe we are using Sucuri on your site right now. So that's one thing that I really like is Sucuri's service, and Sucuri is Sucuri.net, and they offer, their big tagline here: "We secure your site so you don't have to." And they do web antivirus plus firewall, is what they say. So their firewall is actually another service called Cloud Proxy, which is very much like Cloudflare. The idea being that you direct all of your web traffic through their network before it hits your site. So you've got the ability to filter out stuff before it hits your server, DDoS attacks and stuff like that. But the other thing that they do is that they do malware scanning and file integrity monitoring. And what's great about that is that when you install, in fact, I'll show this to you on IvyCat's site. How about? Because we use it as well. I hope you guys don't remember that password. Yeah, John, you're right. You also have WordPress or WordFence, and WordFence is a great product. So this is IvyCat's WordPress dashboard here, and I'll go into Sucuri security here. And so what happens is I sign up through the web, and then I install a proprietary plugin from them. They've got a free plugin in the WordPress.org repository that'll do some scanning of your site and some help. But this one actually plugs into our Sucuri account, and we get reports and stuff through Sucuri.net. We actually have almost 30 people on our Sucuri account right now. So on the dashboard, it gives you an overview of the site. If there are any warnings here, like in this case, it's given me some warnings that there were a bunch of WordPress core files modified. So that's a great service of Sucuri, is that they sort of compare the WordPress files on your site with and do file integrity monitoring. So as files change, they'll let you know. And in this case, I would be scared on this if I didn't know that I had just updated WordPress on ivycat.com to WordPress version 4, which came out yesterday. So that's why all these are modified. And you can see latest events. It'll tell you, hey, so my head-on logged in. That's me. And then someone tried to log in as IvyCat, but their authentication failed. That was earlier. And then it gives a little list of other things that have gone on. In settings in Sucuri, this is a little bit pokey. Maybe I can open a few tabs here. So settings is really where you set your API key that ties into the Sucuri account, and then you get the ability to turn on or off active response, which is basically a web firewall that is on the server. So what this means is if someone's coming to the site and doing something bad, they can block their IP address right away. And what you see, if you look at like the block list here, is it's a list of IP addresses that have been blacklisted from the website. And they're blacklisted for a certain period of time and then taken off the blacklist, depending upon your settings. I apologize, this is kind of pokey here, but malware scanning, that's this link here. This allows you to execute an external malware scan. So this would be the same thing that you would get if you went to sucuri.net and just put in your URL, and they'll do an external scan. Here is our block list. So this shows whitelisted IP addresses, like IP addresses that are always able to access the site, and then blocked IP addresses. And these are added, there's a ton of them. I mean, I can just scroll down and down and down. So these are addresses that have visited the site and tried to do something bad, like post bad comments, or they're trying to access WordPress files directly that they shouldn't be accessing. So they get shut down. And then one-click hardening this is really one of the cool things in Sucuri. It gives you an actionable list of things that you can do to secure the site. So if your WordPress isn't updated, this will be a little yellow thing and say, hey, you're running an old version of WordPress, you should update it. If you're showing your WordPress version to the world, that's not always a good idea. Like sometimes on the front end of your website, if you were to look at source code, it'll show, this is generated by WordPress 4.0. And while that seems pretty innocuous, if a hacker knows exactly what version you're on, and especially if you're on an older version that's got some known vulnerabilities, if they can discover that easily, that you're running WordPress 3.5 and they know the vulnerabilities with 3.5, they know exactly how to attack the site. So removing version is a good idea. The uploads directory being protected. Basically, there's like 3 settings here: uploads directory, WP content, and WP includes. And what these do is block direct file access within those directories. So each one of these directories contains PHP files, like your WP content directory. That's where your plugins go. That's where themes go. But what you don't want is someone from the outside putting in a URL like ivycat.com/cms/wp content/plugins/name of plugin/a file in the plugin and trying to run that file directly. They should all be run through WordPress. So this is a way to block that stuff. And in most cases, it's a great thing to do. Sometimes there are some themes or plugins, themes specifically, that use some types of files. Like I think they even mentioned Tim Thumb right here, which is a file that is used to dynamically resize images on the fly. And it's had some terrible security vulnerabilities over the years. But the way it's often implemented in sites is that it is put in a theme, and then the theme has to be able to run that file directly. So if you have a theme that uses Tim Thumb and you actually block access to WP content, it can break the theme. So if you guys are doing this on your own, I would say, definitely check things out after you enable, these different features. And then secret keys. This is in your WordPress WP config file. There's secret keys and salts that are randomized that help prevent cross-site scripting cross-site scripting attacks and things like that. And if you've been hacked, it's a good idea to regenerate those keys, and it'll allow you to do that from here. And then removing the readme.html. This is a file that's delivered with every version of WordPress that basically says what version you're on and that sort of stuff. So by removing that, you make it a little harder for attackers to discover what version of WordPress you're running. And then also, this is another little security by obscurity kind of thing. But by default, when you create a WordPress installation, the database tables start with WP underscore. And so the idea is that if an attacker knows that you're using WordPress and you've got lax security, they could try and attack your tables directly. So it's a good idea to change the prefix for those, and this tool will help you do that. And then change default admin username. This is a terrible thing, but basically, in the old days, every time you would fire up a new WordPress instance or install WordPress, the first user was always named admin. The user ID was admin, and you got a chance to set the password. And that kind of sucks because a hacker, you've given them a 50% head start if they know what the username is, right? All they have to do is crack the password. So now when you install WordPress, it doesn't do that. It lets you name the initial user. But when you install the Sucuri plugin, it'll look to see if you've got a user named admin. And if so, it'll say, that's not a good idea. Let's change that. And then it'll also take a look at your PHP version and make sure you're not using anything with vulnerabilities in it. So that's Sucuri. One of the greatest things about the Sucuri service, aside from the additional hardening, is that if your site gets hacked, they will clean it. And they've got some automated methods of cleaning, and then they can get in there as well and dig in and help recover a hacked website. So that's great. And we're darn near out of time here, folks. I guess we didn't really cover WordFence. John, you have experience with WordFence, but maybe we'll put that on the docket for an upcoming office hours thing here. I'd say, some of the other things that we talked that said we were going to talk about security plugins, we got through Sucuri, and so we're going to call it good at that for right now. But just a moment about good passwords. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but passwords that can be found in a dictionary are no good. Passwords that can be found in a dictionary and then have 1, 2, 3 exclamation point after them are no good. It's really important to use good passwords. And I'll tell you a story. We got a new client last month, came to us because their site was hacked and they needed better WordPress support. And I said, hey, what I'm going to need to get started is access to your hosting account and access to your WordPress. Can you give me the username and password? And in this particular case, the gentleman I was talking to, he gave me the username, which was his wife's first name, and he gave me the password, which was his wife's first name. Not great. And so that's basically why you get hacked, is by using insecure credentials like that. So I'm a big fan of using password managers. I'm primarily a Mac user now, and so I use a plugin called 1Password. It also works for Windows as well. Number 1Password. So there's also LastPass and several other things like this, but I think that is a really important thing to do. And one of the reasons it's important is because I've been hacked before. And my quick story with this is I guess it was 2 years ago now, someone hacked my Twitter account. And all of a sudden, they hacked my Twitter account. They got my password. So the problem was I had at the time I had 3 passwords that I used. I had a really insecure password that I used for baloney. I had a more secure password that I used for many things, and then I had a really secure password that I used for servers and stuff like that. Well, they compromised my middle password. They compromised the one that I used everywhere. And so they basically found out what my password was for Twitter. And then when I realized this, I thought, oh no, that's the same password that I use on my Chase bank account and I just went through this list of all sorts of, really important sites that use that same password. So I had to haul patootie and go change a ton of passwords. So don't make the same mistake I did. Try and find a good password managing plugin that works for you and rely on it. And it'll be just like your cell phone, where you forget everybody's phone numbers and all your passwords because you rely on the tool. But it's really, really helpful for security. So I think I'm going to call it good at that. Any questions for you guys? Or any questions that you guys have? Don't all shout out at once, please. Great. Hey, you guys are quite welcome. I'm so glad you showed up, and I hope to do this again next month. And holler if you have anything specific that you'd really like to hear about. Since you guys are the first attendees, I'm going to listen extra hard to you. So if there's anything you want to talk about next time, just drop me an email or put it in the chat window here and let me know. And with that, I guess we'll call it good. I want to thank you again for showing up, and I'm going to encode this little recording, and I'll put it up on the website if you want to refer to it in the future for whatever reason. And that's it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks.